Welcome to HortTube. My name is John Putnam. This is the garden question and answer video that I do every Sunday. You can ask gardening questions down below this video in the comment section, and that's where we pick from. I don't know how many are written down actually this week. I think there's as many as 24, and I think there were more than that, and that we've written down just in case we came up short another week. So there were a lot of great questions this past week, so thank you guys for participating. I got the all of February up for the weekly garden planner, which completed the entire year for the weekly garden planner if you own it. And now we're jumping in and adding additional content. We're going to be doing a pruning, when to prune chart for early pruning things. That'll go up on March. So we're going to be bulking it up now. And if you own the weekly garden planner, you don't have to pay anything more for anything that gets added to it later. You own it. And then the Learn to Garden video series is also getting additional content this month as well. Steph is doing a 4th design plan for that. So there's discounts for both of those down below the video if you're interested. T-shirts are going to be 10% off during the month of February. The code is here on the screen for that, and down below the video if you're interested in any t-shirts over on the website as well. So thank you guys so much for participating in all different ways you participate on the channel. Just watching the videos makes YouTube recommend the videos, if nothing else. So whatever it is you're doing, engaging in the content, I appreciate it. So thank you very much. Let's see. There was a lot of comments I talked about last week about answered a question about preparing a garden as you get older, you know, for being able to continue to work in it. And we are going to make some sort of video content based around that at some point. And one other thing before we jump into some questions, there was I had gotten an email from Lizzie that her husband's birthday was February 2nd as this video is going up. So happy birthday to Tyler. Thank you so much for watching the channel. There we go. Let's see. Let's jump right into some questions. This may be the fastest to questions I've ever been, so here we go. This person's in zone 8, and they have a conifer in a container that's hardy in zone 4 to 8. It's 2 zones more cold hardier than their area, or more. It's more than 2 zones cold hardier. So it works well to have that as a container plant outside during the winter time for sure. So if you're putting something in a container, you're gonna leave it in a container through the winter. If it's at least 1 for sure zone cold hardier than your area, because keep in mind the roots are gonna be colder in the container above the ground. 2 zones is best for sure. They just happen to be 3 zones more cold hardy. But what will happen in the heat during the summer? Well, obviously that's going to reverse, you know, and now the roots are gonna be hotter than they would be in a container. So your conifer, if you're leaving it in a container during the summer, that container probably needs to be in a little bit of shade. So if there's a spot where you could put some other containers around it and have that container not be blasted directly with the sun, that would probably be ideal. Have the conifer itself probably needs sun, so you want it in a space where it can get some sun, but somehow or another, if you were to put the container down in between some other plants that are in the ground, plant some annuals around it, whatever, but try to keep that pot slightly cooler because those roots are going to be hotter during the summertime. So the reverse happens, you know, at the other time of the year. Plus, if the container's black, you know, that's another thing. It's going to heat up. What we found at the nursery is when we have these plants in big giant blocks, and one edge of the blocks, always you could pull the plants out of the containers and the roots would be burned off on one side. You know, where the black container was great at helping extend the season, you know, for growing time in a plant nursery, but then in the peak summer, you know, could do some damage to the roots, you know, in those containers. Let's see, this person's in the Pacific Northwest. They have zone map confusion. They're in zone 8B, British Columbia, Canada. You know, and I'm in 8A in Raleigh, North Carolina. Think about how much further north that is. But they're in, you know, in 8B. They don't get as cold as we do on average. And they're wondered about, do they get enough chill hours for some plants? Should they avoid plants that are prone to powdery mildew because they stay cloudy and drizzly so much of the year? And just any tips in general. It's an interesting thing about the Pacific Northwest versus the Southeast, because in the Southeast we get I think we get a lot more rain. You just have it extended over a longer period of time. But we will get 40 some inches of rain here in Raleigh, and more as you move south, 70 by the time you get down to Mobile, Alabama, and over to Pensacola. Those areas get tons of rain, but they get it in big batches, you know, and not necessarily lingering on for months of cloudy, drizzly weather kind of rain. It gives you the opportunity. So the Pacific Northwest gives you an opportunity to grow some of the conifers that are, you know, when we say a conifer zone 4 to 8 hardy, a lot of times that zone 8 is really the Pacific Northwest, and it's actually kind of too hot in the southeast for a lot of those zone 4 to 8 conifers. So out there you get an opportunity to grow some things that don't like heat stress, you know, summer heat stress as much, but you probably do lose being able to grow some things that need a little more cold stratification, that actually need a certain number of hours below a temperature. Your temperature just stays the same so much that you lose some of those things. But the main thing about selecting plants for your area, and this is a big part of the weekly garden planner, is just like, I guarantee you in British Columbia, almost every plant has been tried. And so you have great gardens, I'm sure, that you can go and visit and see really what's performing well in your area, what other nurserymen are doing, what garden centers are bringing in, what, you know, and then public gardens, especially, that's the nice thing about the J.C. Ralston Arboretum over here. Duke Garden is a beautiful garden. It's a, you know, kind of, it's a pleasure garden, and it's artistic. And then we have the North Carolina Botanic Garden in Chapel Hill, which is mostly all native plants, or is native plants, that we can go and see. And then we have the Ralston. So we have a version of all three here. The Ralston is really a place that is almost, it's a trialing place for plants so that nurserymen, landscapers, other folks can see what might perform well here under, you know, just plant it in the ground and kind of forget it, see what it does. You have some sort of garden like that in your area that I would visit and find out the best plants, you know, how plants are performing, how plants generally perform in your area versus other places. The zone map is a good starting point, and that's it. Everything else about it, you know, summer heat plays such a big role. How many hours you spend below 45 degrees in the winter plays a big role. Humidity plays a big role. Seasonal drought, you know, seasonal rain, where you have seasonal rain where you are, and we tend to have, I mean, it rained last night here, and it'll rain, could rain July 13th or September 4th or May 8th. I mean, it could rain any day here, and that may not be the case where you are. So really finding local places to go and observe and what your neighbors are doing and other landscapes and tour. You know, this is a great time of year, and said this in another thing in the weekly garden planner was about, this is a great time of year to find out what speakers are coming to your area for your, you know, if you do have those local gardens, I guarantee you they have a list of speakers that are coming to your area that will talk about various topics. You know, I've got several speaking things that I'm doing this year, and you know, those will be on the list for whatever area that is of the world that you live in, and you can go and maybe learn something from somebody who's gardened in your area for 20 or 30 years. Okay, just throwing that out. That's the main reason I wrote that down. Somebody has a service berry that they haven't been happy with in Zone 8B in North Carolina. Been there for 4 years. They'd like another small tree recommendation. If they did the service berry, maybe they're looking for another native plant. Maybe that was the reason that they put in a service berry in the first place. But you could definitely do, you know, our native fringe tree, a red bud. I don't know how much sun, you know, this is in, but my forest pansy redbud was in the full sun at the old house and did fine. Halesia would be another one, and then non-native trees, of course, you know, Coosa dogwood, styrax, non-native fringe tree, you know, Chinese fringe tree. We have that Tokyo Tower fringe tree here, the upright narrow one if you don't have a lot of space. So there's a lot of, I think you have a lot of options for small ornamental trees in your area of the state for sure. Do we plan on being on the Blue Sky app? I did create an account and have a HortTube, HortTube on Blue Sky. I haven't posted a thing on it. I don't post anything on Facebook really for this, or, you know, Blue Sky, I guess, is going to be the equivalent of that. I do post over on Instagram, probably not as frequently as I should, but it's at HortTube on Instagram if you want to go follow on Instagram. I always tend to think of Instagram as like Facebook for happy people, you know, because it's just, you know, flowers and people's puppies and events and, you know, this bark, you know, landing over here on this new project. I should have probably said why I'm standing in front of a load of wood chips, but if you haven't this past week seen the video from the middle of the week about this property next to us is now going to be part of the garden project here in Raleigh, and this is going to be all native plants on this side. Got 2 loads of wood chips in, spreading these out. I'm actually not going to mend this a whole lot. I know this wood chip seemed like it's a whole lot, but I'm really just trying to get this grass killed and the Liriope, Mondo grass, Creeping Charlie, all kinds of stuff that's over here. So it's just been mowed really close to the ground, and then I'm covering it in these wood chips. And so this will be about the total amending that we're going to do, just trying to get it protected. And I don't know what the heck question I was on when all that started, but I do, you know, posted these photos on Instagram during the week. And what I mean by that is you know, I see people posting things on Facebook, and then I read the comments, and it's always so negative, and so I don't know. It's like I never understand it. You know, I have this YouTube channel, and I have this incredible group of people watching at home that I'm, you know, that you know, I don't know how many views last week's Q&A had, but it's thousands and thousands and thousands of people, and you read the comments down below it, and it's all positive. It's good energy. Same thing on the Instagram. You know, I post the same video on Facebook, and it's just some person that's up at 2 o'clock in the morning that's angry at the world or something, making, you know, comments, and it's just like, I don't understand it. So that's the reason I don't post on Facebook typically. I don't know if Blue Sky will be any different than that. It's another, you know, social media app. But anyway, that just in general, that's the reason I'm not on Facebook on personally or rarely personally and never for the business. But again, Instagram at HortTube. Not trying to make anything of that other than just saying that, yes, I created an account on Blue Sky, haven't posted anything on it yet. Okay. Should all plants be root pruned? Should all plants be root pruned to the later transplant, or just evergreens? They're in 8A, Georgia. They got Fatsia, Lantana, Shasta viburnum, gardenia, hydrangeas, paniculatas, hydrangea macrophylla they want to move. Almost all of those things I would definitely root prune. A lot of it depends on how long they've been in the ground. You don't really have to root prune something that you planted last year and now you're ready to move it somewhere else already. That thing's not going to be rooted in the ground in some way that requires to be root pruned. So if it's been in the ground, let's say 3 seasons or more, and it's like a woody shrub, I would probably root prune it. I'm not going to root prune herbaceous perennials. I'm not going to root prune things that have just barely been in the ground for any length of time. So, you know, but any woody plant that's been in the ground 3 years or more, I'd probably go root prune it and then allow it a few weeks before you actually transplant it. I think it's a good overall strategy. Does centipede grass do well in the Raleigh area? Looking for one that doesn't need spraying. Hate the creeping Bermuda they have now. So yes, centipede does very well here, and it is the lowest input turf grass. It requires the least amount of nitrogen, the least amount of inputs. If you go look at our centipede fertilizer, you'll see what I mean. It's very low. It's very low nitrogen. It just doesn't need as much as other things. The problem with centipede and zoysia is if you have Bermuda already, Bermuda will eat both of them for supper. And so we had a beautiful zoysia lawn, emerald zoysia lawn at the garden center when I was a teenager, and in our patio furniture display area, and a little bit of Bermuda grass got into it, and it just, you know, you're trying to pull it out, you're trying to deal with it, but it just took it over in time. And so I think yes, centipede is a great alternative to most other turf grasses here, because it will have the lowest inputs and it's self-repairing, like Bermuda or zoysia or St. Augustine. But Bermuda grass is a giant weed in it, and so you need to make sure every bit of that Bermuda grass is dead before you try your centipede turf. It can compete with it some, but it's just, you know, Bermuda's just better at out competing it. Let's see. Somebody wants a video comparing different grasses, not knowledgeable on grasses for lawns. So we're going to, on the weekly garden planner, be adding turf related things on it. When I first read that question, I didn't realize this was about turf grasses. So that stuff's going to be added to the weekly garden planner. I thought it was about ornamental grasses, but ornamental grass wise, I'm going to have several videos coming up. I took a ton of photos last year, spring and fall, of ornamental grasses all over the place, and I just haven't put the video together yet, comparing ornamental grasses. In terms of turf grasses, that stuff's going to get added to the weekly garden planner this year on how to take care of, and also on the Learn to Garden video series too, just the differences between different types of turf grasses. Okay, this person has some balsam firs and Fraser firs, and how they wanted to know how to tell whether they're underwatering or overwatering them. The needles are brown on the if the needles are brown on the inside, are they overwatering them? That's actually opposite typically. Typically, if you're looking at a conifer and you're seeing it thin in the middle, it's been underwatered. They all do it though in the fall, somewhat. You're gonna see in any conifer, you're gonna see a little bit of interior browning in the fall. It's just the way they operate. They thin from the middle out over time. If it's excessive though, that means it's likely underwatered or underwatered. It may not mean it's dry that day. It may have just means it was dry going into fall, because fall is when a lot of those conifers are gonna put on a little bit of growth. And so they'll shed some interior foliage during that period of time. If the tips are browning, are they underwatered? No, typically and this is true of lots of plants, it's not, you know, it's hard to, I'm always guessing at these things, right? Because I haven't seen it. But typically, if you have issues in the newer growth, whether it's a leafy plant or a grass or a herbaceous perennial of some kind, or a tree or a conifer, whatever the heck it is, if you're seeing issues in the newer foliage, you've got, and hold on just a second, I'll go grab something. Okay, so here's a pittosporum, a piece of pittosporum I just pulled off from a Wheeler's dwarf. That's from a Wheeler's dwarf pittosporum. You see the damage there? That's some winter damage on it. But it actually before that had some off coloration in the new growth toward the end of the season, and it was some sort of micronutrient deficiency in some way or another. Now, what was causing it? You know, you say, well, maybe an iron deficient. Should I add some iron? Probably not. It was probably just under some sort of heat stress. I've got it out in a little more sun than that Wheeler's dwarf pittosporum would actually like. And so there may have been some stress related thing that wasn't allowing it to process the iron properly, or whatever the deficiency is. Just throwing out a particular, you know, a lot of times we see iron deficiency in stressed plants or plants where the pH is too high for that particular plant to have iron available to it. But typically, if there's a problem in the new growth, that's going to be some sort of overwatering or heat stress or some sort of micronutrient deficiency that's happened. So that can be browning in the needles on a conifer. It can be off coloration in the leaves. It could be that we're seeing the mid veins on the leaves, some sort of, and then going into winter, we have virtually no cold damage on anything, but I do have some cold damage on this, and I think that really came from it being under some stress going into winter, because I saw the color change before that. But so again, if the damage is in the newer growth on the plant, it's usually related to it was too wet or too hot, or there's some stress related thing happening to it for sure. The underwatering thing in conifers tends to appear in the old foliage in the middle of the plant. But you will get some of that in the fall, and don't freak out if you're getting a small amount of browning on your conifers in the fall, in the middle. Okay, let's see. Okay, and then somebody said that on the weekly garden planner, the addition of specific pruning time chart would be great. That's coming. Okay, this person is in Ireland. They have a 5-foot it was a balled and burlapped Chamaecyparis, a columnar Chamaecyparis. So that they got as a balled and burlap plant. Well, balled and burlap means it was grown in a field. It was dug up and then burlap was wrapped around it. Sometimes a metal cage is put on it depending on how big it is. Other times it's just a burlap wrapping around the roots. They had a big storm a month later and it took it down to the ground. So it leaned it over. They put it in a pot for a few days and then back in the ground. Are they likely to see damage from this? I don't think you'll know probably until some new growth starts on it. But what happens is, you know, when that thing gets taken to the ground, we have to be really, really careful with balled and burlap plants because typically we have to pick them up by the ball because they're so heavy, maybe with a machine or whatever. And the top of that plant doesn't get supported. It whips around a lot. And so I see that when people are taking, you know, a bobcat and going over to a trailer and picking a tree up off the trailer from, you know, they'll lay them down on a trailer, the balled and burlap trees. They'll pick them up with a bobcat and they'll just bounce the thing all the way to the hole they already dug, you know, and you're just looking at the top of that tree doing this. It's getting looser and looser and looser in that root ball, and it's breaking roots in all likelihood inside of that root ball. So just be as careful as you can. Get it staked when you put it back in the ground and just make sure it doesn't do any more of that whipping around that it's already done. Because in the transporting it to you and then the storm damage and then you taking it and putting it in a pot, it's been whipped around a lot, right? So it's probably, it had already lost a lot of roots when they dug it out of the ground. So now it's lost more from being whipped around. So I don't think you'll know how much damage has been done. And you probably see some of that interior thinning if, again, because it's going to end up kind of underwater, right? Because it can't get water through the roots for a 5-foot tall plant anymore. So if you do see some of that thinning, once it's settled back into the ground, you can do a little bit of shearing on it to hopefully fill a little bit of that growth back in. But anyway, there you go. How do you deal with leaving your garden behind? They put so much effort into the garden, but thinking of moving. Well, I did that, you know, in Johnston County. I had a couple things in the ground that I wanted to get cuttings on, and I did. And I tell you the thing, I think the thing about dreading, you know, I closed the nursery down. I closed my garden center down. I sold that house and I moved here, and I'm now in less than 1,000 square feet of living space, plus this little outbuilding that's behind the camera right now. Steph and I travel in an RV, you know, to all these gardens and nurseries and things, and we downsized the RV last year too. I've been downsizing for a long time, and I have found, and I'm just going to tell you this, you know, this is just true. When you sell something that you thought was valuable to you, a week or two later, you won't remember it anymore. And I know that sounds bad. I'm able to drive past the old house and see what things look like. And there's some things that look good, some things that have been, you know, not, I didn't expect a young couple with young children moving into my house over there. They were going to maintain it like I did, but there's still some things that look pretty good and some things that don't. And I've been able to go over there and get some cuttings since from that garden. But I didn't miss it like I thought I would. I did get some things out of there that mattered to me though. So that, you know, that I would say on your leaving your garden behind, if there are some things there that were your parents or a friend gave them to you, or they have a story in some way, I would get some cuttings off of them, or agree with the new homeowner as part of the sale that 2 or 3 of these plants are coming with you. Do that kind of thing. Take something with you from it for sure. But I think that something I've discovered over the last 5 or 6 years is a lot of the things that you think are, you know, so important to you aren't as important as you think they are a month or 2 later, because you're going to be in this new exciting place where you get to start over, you get to redo some things, you can bring some of those plants with you, and you can jump into a new project, which I think is exciting as well. But how do you deal with leaving your garden behind? I left so many things behind, but they're memories now, but they're not, it's not like I sit around and think about, you know, I do wish I had a tractor to move this. Bark right this minute. I wish I probably should have. I said in a video that went up yesterday, as you're watching this, that I probably should have rented a tractor just because I could have moved this in 30 minutes with my tractor. But that's life. But there you go. Rip the Band-Aid off of it. Grab some things that you want. Rip the Band-Aid off of it, and move on to a new challenge. Will plants outgrow deer browsing, or can they be moved to a better location? And then companion planting to prevent deer browsing. Okay, some things will a little bit. Leaves can get thicker on things. Juvenile growth is definitely more tempting to deer and rabbits, 100%. Rabbits especially. Rabbits, when plants are really small and have lots of tender new growth on them, and then you'll see that as the plant matures in some way, the rabbits are less prone to chew on it. Deer, yes, I'm sure there are a few plants that would fit that outgrow deer browsing thing, but probably not a lot. Probably most of them, they're still going to come back to them. But if there are something that thickens up, the leaves get bigger in time, the leaves get thicker, they become less desirable to them probably. But most of your plants probably not are going to fit that. And then, you can move them to hopefully a location that's up closer to the house, although, the deer, there's just so many of them. And I'm looking out here right now. I mean, we have deer here a mile from downtown Raleigh, and, they're deer right here. And then this companion planting work, I don't want to say it doesn't, because I've never tried it before. When people are planting alliums and garlic and onions and things like that around beds to keep browsing animals out, I know that people say it works. I don't have any experience with it. They have 2 Indian hawthorns. Should they move them near their front door, or where would they have to move them to? You'd have to move your Indian hawthorns to the moon probably to keep deer from eating them. I had deer at the nursery that would walk past everything. They'd walk past the roses with the tender growth on them. They'd walk past everything I know they love, azaleas, it didn't matter what it was, to get to those Indian hawthorns. Indian hawthorns, for some reason, are at the very tippy top of the list for deer, for browsing. There know something's in it. It's such a strange thing because it's a native white-tailed deer, and it's a Chinese, or an Asian Indian hawthorn. It happens to be in the rose family, but they know there's something in that plant that they need and like, and they love eating those things. So I don't know where you can move your Indian hawthorns that they won't eat them. Probably on the inside of a sidewalk up against the house is probably a fairly safe place, but otherwise, I don't think there was anything at the nursery that was higher on the list of things for the deer to find, and they would just go through the whole nursery to get to the Indian hawthorns. Let's see. Somebody has a Weigela French lace that was hit by the rabbits. Do they bloom on old or new wood? Unfortunately, most of the flowers are on old wood on Weigela, so I don't know how many flowers you'll end up with this year. That's likely a plant, though, that if you put a small cage around it for a limited amount of time, it would get big enough to for the rabbits not to mess with it. It's just going to that's a plant that's, again, fits that rabbit description. When it's small and it's got a lot of tender growth on it, they're going to be drawn to it, but by the time, both of my Weigela over there are 4 feet tall. There's no rabbit's going to mess with that thing now, or they can't even stand up high enough to get to anything. But rabbits tend to be drawn to really super juvenile foliage. Let's see, how do we handle snakes in the garden? Their neighbors have seen copperheads. Is shaking flowers and shrubs with a stick enough to scare them away before gardening? We don't have any snakes in this garden other than like worm snakes. I have seen a couple snakes, in my walking around the area, but we just don't have anything in this garden. I did have copperheads at the old house, and I had 2 of them. One day, came home from lunch from the nursery, got out of the truck, and Holly was young at the time. She was maybe 2 or 3. Holly walked over 2 copperheads that were doing their thing on my sidewalk at the house. She just walked right over top of them. They were so preoccupied they didn't care, but it was a crazy little moment because I saw it, and Holly just walked right over top of them and went to the front door. but I just didn't think about it. I didn't, I know some folks are going to be really, really scared of snakes in the garden, and snakes have just never been on my list of things to worry about. We had so many snakes at the nursery when you have ponds, when you get ponds involved, and those pots are hiding places, and of course you're gonna have mice trying to nest in between the containers, especially in the wintertime when there's covers over the plants and the plants are pot tight. Every mouse and any small mammal is going to want to go be up in those pots during the wintertime under those covers protected for the winter. And of course you're going to get snakes. Snakes aren't active that time of year, but they're active shortly in the spring, when they're active in the spring. That I just have never worried about it. But yes, if you are worried about it, you may also think about not having lots of low mounding plants. That pittosporum that I've ripped the piece off of over there, it's 4 feet wide and 2 feet tall. It's a good place for a snake to hide under for sure. So it might be also that the plants that you have, you're thinking through that if you are really scared of snakes. We do get a lot of copperhead bites in the state of North Carolina. I mean, it is on the list. Unfortunately for us, when I was a kid, we saw very few copperheads. I mean, I saw them as a kid, and I was the ultimate explorer as a kid in the city here, and we'd see the occasional copperhead. But I think what happened is there are some people out there who will kill every snake they see, and every snake you see happens to be all the colorful snakes and the black snakes and the snakes that are of no harm to us, would do no harm to us whatsoever. But I think it gave the copperhead the advantage because the copperhead's the most camouflaged snake. And so I've wondered this, through my life, is why did copperheads come to dominate, the main snake that we see here in the area? And I think it's because, again, I think people killed every snake they could see. And then the copperhead happens to be the best camouflage snake. The fall is the dangerous time with the copperheads because when the leaves are falling, but it's still warm enough for them to be out, you could just not see them in the leaf litter. So be careful in the fall when you're raking and that kind of thing. That's when I've seen people have issues with them. And they're on the move trying to find a place for the winter and that kind of thing. All right, that was enough about snakes. Let's see. How would you prune quart-sized shrubs the best? And they were asking about spirea. So if you had a spirea in a little quart pot and it was this big, you could hold that thing together and cut it in half, and without any problem whatsoever. It's going to be depending on the plant. I would not be pruning conifers in a quart pot a whole lot. I wouldn't be pruning things that are slow to come back from pruning. But deciduous plants in a quart pot, if I had calicarpa or clethra or anything that was a deciduous shrub in a quart pot, I'd cut it off with its head. We had rooted cuttings in the greenhouse. We would root our spirea, let's say in June, then we just leave them in the greenhouse through the winter. As they were waking up in the spring, we would just take the trays and give them a haircut off the top and pot them into gallon pots at that time, or directly into 3-gallon containers at that time, but we just cut them in half when we were doing it. So spirea, I wouldn't even sweat. It's going to come back out from pruning it in half if you needed to, if they're stretched. But then, just like conifers in the ground, I'm going to be very careful, when or how to cut on them. But most of your deciduous plants that you have in little tiny pots, off with their heads. Let's see, not trees. Don't cut your Japanese maple in half in the quart pot, but shrubs. Now for the loaded question of this week that will get Jim, get me in trouble is, what definition will we use for this native plant garden over here? We're gonna have plants that are native to the Southeast United States, maybe a couple that are outside of that space, but that's the plan. It's such a divisive topic, native plants now. So it's always funny because anytime I'm bringing up Asian plants in the garden over here, it's like, you need more natives. But if I go through this garden and count the number of natives I have over here, it's going to be more than probably most people watching, and more than would have been on this lot, if we weren't gardening it, for sure, because of the number of invasives, that are out and about here. So I'm an equal opportunity plant person. As long as the plant that I'm adding is not going to escape out here into the woods, then I kind of don't care where it's from, as long as I'm giving lots of opportunity to our native pollinators and our, and you guys have seen that out here in this garden. So when I say this is going to be a native garden, I immediately I'm gonna, the hair on people's necks is gonna raise up, and it's like, what do you mean by native? Is it straight species native, or is it named cultivar natives, or if it's got to be native to just your county, or is it going to be? I mean, it's immediately. This is going to be a teaching spot for me to show off some native plants that you guys have never seen me plant in other projects or grown, things that I like, that Steph and I spend a lot of time botanizing out in the woods. We were down in Florida last week. This is what we were doing. We were riding our bikes through the Keys, through the woods, identifying plants and animals and other things. It's something we really enjoy doing, and we want to bring that to the garden here. But that doesn't at the same time mean that I don't like Asian plants and African plants and Australian plants and other plants, as long as those plants don't, again, escape out here into the woods. So that's that combination for me. It's just, I'm a plantsman. And then plants move around the world. I mean, it's what they do. The land is moving, the birds are moving things, everything is moving. Humans, unfortunately, sped it up a little too much, and have moved things too quickly for bees and other things to adapt quick enough, right? When we can add so many invasives so quickly, that we sped the clock up too much, and that was a mistake, for some of the things that were brought here and weren't tested well before they were released out into the world. But again, I'm an equal opportunity plant person, and this native garden, I hope, is going to be fun. I hope people are going to get something out of it, and I hope people can relax and not take it so seriously, okay, that, it happens to be a named cultivar or a named variety, or it's not the straight species, or it's not. But again, I know that's not going to happen. And people are going to be, I'm going to get negativity on it. It's just anytime you bring up the word native or native plants, that's the way it is. People have just dug into opinions on it. And that's kind of where we are. My opinion, though, is if we want to have native plants in our, people to pick native plants for our ornamental gardens, we do need to be selecting for behavior that fits ornamental gardens. In those plants, and not plants that run all over the place and that kind of thing. Just my opinion of it. Okay, so this person was gone for 2.5 weeks during the deep freeze in New Jersey. They put unplanted pots of shrubs in their 50-degree basements with a 50-degree basement with a grow light. How much time and what's the best way to harden them off to return them outside? As soon as it's above freezing outside, I'm getting those things out. So if I'm imagine, heck, we're supposed to be like 78 or something on Thursday. So I'm guessing even up in New Jersey, you're going to be warmer this week. So I would get them out in a part shaded space as quick as possible, any day that's above freezing, and get them heading in that direction for being reoriented outside. You don't want them to wake up down there. That's the main thing. Can dormant oil spray for fruit trees be sprayed now when it's freezing? You're going to need to read the instructions. No, I don't think you do it when it's freezing. And most chemicals, this is the dormant oil is not necessarily going to be considered a chemical, because it's going to be like soybean oil or something like that. But anything that you're buying for your plant should have some sort of sheet that is available online or on the bottle that says what the minimum temperature, maximum temperature to spray it is. Super important. You're spraying any kind of chemistry in your garden. You go out and spray something on a 95-degree day and didn't read the bottle that it said, please don't spray this if it's over 85 degrees Fahrenheit. You're gonna find out, what happens when it's that hot outside or when it's that cold outside. So it should be on it, or if you don't have the full detailed sheet for it, it should be online, whatever brand dormant oil you're using, and it'll tell you the minimum and maximum temperatures to spray it in your garden. Or this was on fruit trees, and so anytime fruit trees comes up, I always say call your extension agent in your county. Every county in America should have an extension agent, and find out from them if there's some sort of, a lot of times there'll be a pruning demonstrations for fruit trees during this time of year, and they'll be able to maybe give you some sort of sheet about your area about when you do certain things for fruit trees, because it's going to be different across the country. This person has an old dogwood in Zone 8A Atlanta. It's underplanted with some overgrown azaleas. They want to cut down the azaleas. Would mulch be enough to protect the dogwood roots? So if I didn't know by cut down whether it means you're going to hard prune the azaleas. If you're just going to hard prune them, I think the dogwood will be fine. If you're removing the azaleas, you're definitely going to want to make sure the roots are mulched, but you're also going to potentially do some damage to the roots anyway if you're digging out those azaleas. And then, every dogwood I see in this neighborhood that's planted out in the grass or in open space is really, really struggling. So for me, if I got a good vibe going between the azaleas and the dogwood, I'm probably not going to mess with them a whole lot. I'm probably just going to hard prune those azaleas to kind of reset them, clean up in the interior of them, and maybe not remove them. Just letting you know, I mean, our native dogwoods are really in a struggle. Let's see. Somebody had sparkleberry holly that was pruned hard last year, and then it started suckering, but it's still too large. Can they prune it again and remove they called them water sprouts, were suckers. Yeah, you can definitely, cut it again, but every time you cut it, you're going to increase that suckering that's happening on that plant. This is a native plant that's, going to sucker, and we're going to see some of that over here on this side of the lot for sure. Some of the native plants can really sucker quite a bit, can colonize basically a space. So yeah, when you cut it again, keep in mind it's going to do that some more. And they also wanted to know if they could dig up some of those suckers and transplant them. Yes, some you will and some you won't, but if you have enough suckers, you can take your shovel and stick it down in there and separate a few. You'll find some that have roots on them and some that won't. But you're getting rid of the suckers anyway, so you'll probably find a couple you can transplant if you're trying to transplant a few as well. But keep in mind, you're transplanting a sparkleberry holly or your deciduous holly that has a tendency to sucker. So be careful the one you're transplanting, because it's, again, it's one that obviously is probably going to sucker where it goes as well. So yes, you can cut it. This may not be the plant for you if you're having to prune it every year, and then you're having to take these suckers out. You're never going to see the thing flower and fruit, so just throwing that out there. This person wants to get their house power washed, but the last company used what smelled like bleach. I'm sure it was bleach. What to look for in a good company? I would just look at reviews. You got to ask them what they're using and tell them that you're not interested in having, bleach added to the house, for your plants that you have planted, around it. Just find out what chemicals they're using. You really don't have to use a whole lot of chemicals typically to, with a power washer to get things clean. It seems like sometimes the bleach is probably over the top, unless it's extreme. I mean, there are cases, where there's a lot of mildew on something that the bleach is necessary, but again, look at their reviews and then just ask them flat out, do you have something that will I don't want bleach sprayed around the house. Last question for this week. Somebody has a taxodium in 9B, Central Florida, 2 years. It's about 4 feet tall. They had to cut some deep roots out of the sandy soil. They will root down very deep in the ground to transplant. They don't have a ton of roots left. They had root pruned it, so they had gone around the outside and not realized that that's actually a plant that has a tap root on it. Some of our conifers, this pine that's over here next to me, is going to have some sort of tap root that goes down as well. Will it survive? I don't know. If you cut the tap root on something, sometimes they will and sometimes they won't survive that. Be interesting whether it's able to reform a tap root in the future and get itself anchored back in regardless. But yeah, there are some plants that have roots that go, straight down. Pecan tree is one of those that, in fact, I took the certified plantsman test. North Carolina has a certified plantsman test. at an event called Green and Growing, which is the second weekend in January every year. I didn't go this year, but a lot of years I do go. It's over in Greensboro, and they do all the testing during Green and Growing, which all the nurserymen setting up their displays for garden centers and landscapers to come in and shop for plants. But part of it is there's speakers there, and a lot of the state testing goes on. So I did my landscape contractor exam there. I did my certified plantsman. I was 18 years old, certified plantsman exam. Terrible time to take certified plantsman exam because the plants are deciduous, and so about a third of the plants that were on the thing are without leaves. And so there were 2 cherries on my test. I still want to protest this to this day, that they put 2 different cherries, deciduous cherries, on my certified plantsman test. I thought that was pretty unfair, but I ended up passing. But one of the plants that was in it was a pecan tree, and they grow them in these tall cylindrical containers. And I walked past this stick in this pot 5 or 6 times. I had done the whole, I had answered all I could answer, and I was going back around to the 5 or 6 that, 2 cherries and that pecan tree. I kept going around and looking at the 5 or 6 that I just didn't know. And I finally looked at that container and went, oh my gosh, Jim. So it was pecan tree is grown in a deep container because of this. And probably taxodium should be as well, and a few other things that have deeper taproots. So they're much harder to transplant. They just don't like to be transplanted as much. We won't know on this. Now the nice thing is your taxodium is dormant, it's asleep, and so it's going to be able to, where other conifers are keeping their needles and are going to be under a heck of a lot more stress, this thing at least is at rest while you're transplanting it. So it has a good, we'll see. That's the only thing I could say on that. So thank you guys so much for participating, asking questions. Again, ask questions down in the comment section. Again, the t-shirts are 10% off for the month of February. I think there's 7 designs or something. Also the tickets for the open garden. Again, we're steady expanding the garden right now. The tickets for the open garden are also in the store on the website, as well as the weekly garden planner and the Learn to Garden video series. Thank you so much for watching.